Hi everyone, my name is Abhiraj Garakapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Abhi.
I summon the ancient spell. Reveal your worlds. Every story has a world.
Of his life, he concludes that the respect he earned from this consistency became his strength, and the very definition of his honor. Logan questions this stance, asking if the Duke would truly stand by and watch the nation fall just to keep his personal honor intact. He suggests the Duke could save the country by sacrificing that pride. Contorted with strain, the Duke counters by asking if a nation saved through the sacrifice of honor is truly saved at all. Slamming his fist onto the desk, he states he sees no solution and demands to know what Logan sees that makes him so certain. Furiously crying out Logan's name, the Sword Duke stares intently at his student, who meets his gaze with a calm, unwavering focus. Logan admitted to the Duke that he lacked absolute certainty, yet he remained firm in his conviction that this was the only path forward. Leaning in with an unconvinced expression, the Sword Duke pressed Logan to explain exactly why this plan was a necessity. Logan responded by declaring that the current civil war was merely the opening act of a far more devastating conflict, grimly warning that, at this rate, the Empire would eventually devour the entire nation. The Sword Duke reacted with stunned disbelief to this severe warning, but Logan pushed his point further. He asked the Duke if the late king's death had not struck him as suspicious, asserting that the circumstances surrounding His Majesty's passing were riddled with doubt. Although Logan admitted he possessed no hard proof, neither from his past life nor the present, he argued that the unnatural timing of the Civil War's outbreak, combined with his own observations and his previous visit to the Empire, pointed toward a larger, hidden plot. He concluded that the Empire was actively preparing for war, which meant the current truth of the world was heavily laced with lies. With his back turned and his expression obscured, Logan addressed his master, suggesting that if the Duke's honor was defined by a life lived in absolute truth, then Logan himself must be viewed as a dishonorable liar. Fixing the Duke with a piercing gaze, Logan declared the one truth he held above all others. If he could thwart the Empire's designs, he would cast aside his honor as many times as necessary to succeed. Staring at the cloaked figure of his student, the Duke finally conceded that there were indeed many suspicious elements regarding the king's death. However, he warned that what Logan proposed was almost too massive to believe outright. He cautioned that even if Logan's claims were true, rising powers like Jordan or H1 would still present monumental obstacles to any success. Logan, focusing his intense gaze back on the Duke, demanded to know if the older man would truly stand by and watch the nation crumble. He reiterated that he would sacrifice his honor instantly if it meant saving the country. The Duke, erupting in fury, shouted that Logan was no different than the others who sought to manipulate the third prince. He recalled that Jordan had once been full of spirit, genuinely hoping the nation would move in a positive direction. From the Duke's perspective, Jordan had been sincere back then. However, once Jordan inherited his dukedom and his daughter bore a prince, he had changed. The Duke then questioned Logan directly, asking how he could be so certain he wouldn't eventually suffer the same moral decay. Logan watched the Duke clench his fist before meeting the older man's eyes with a look of intense focus. Turning slightly away, Logan quietly admitted that he shared that same fear. Staring out the bright window, Logan confessed that he had seen many men fall from grace in that exact manner, and with a somber, determined look, he added that he despised such people. He pleaded with the Sword Duke to believe in his intent, while the Duke remained silent and deep in thought. The Sword Duke challenged Logan to prove his conviction, reminding him that Logan had claimed he would attempt this plan even without the Duke's assistance. However, the Duke conceded that he would, at the very least, not stand in Logan's way. He repeated his demand for proof, leaning in close with a strained face, emphasizing that Logan must demonstrate that this cause was truly worth the Duke breaking his lifelong oath. Logan, his eyes wide with resolve, met his master's demand. As the Sword Duke turned his back and stepped toward the light, he issued one final instruction before Logan departed. The young man was to meet the third prince. Logan reacted with a start, questioning the mention of the boy. The Duke revealed that the third prince was actually taking refuge within his residence at that very moment. Turning back to look at his surprised pupil, the Duke questioned if Logan had really planned to make the boy a king without even consulting the person concerned. Looking away in slight embarrassment, Logan admitted the revelation had caught him off guard. After composing himself, Logan smiled, and the Sword Duke, facing away, offered him a quiet word of thanks. The sun streamed brilliantly through the tall, ornate window, bathing the room in a warm golden light. The third prince stood there with a calm demeanor. As Logan entered and approached him, Logan greeted the royal, noting that it had been quite some time since their last encounter. The prince turned with a sudden start, yet responded with a smile, acknowledging the duration of their absence. Smiling broadly, Logan asked the prince if he had been well and added that he had arrived to fulfill the promise they had shared on that day. The third prince looked visibly surprised and slightly unsettled by the mention of a past vow. Logan quickly clarified, stating that just as he had told the prince back then, he had successfully taken care of Roger. Befros, meeting the prince's gaze with a confident, almost unsettling smile, Logan declared that the time had come for the prince to ascend the throne. The third prince recoiled, repeating the word throne in disbelief. While Logan remained composed, the prince countered by pointing out the harsh reality of his current situation. He was currently hiding and being sheltered in a duke's residence rather than the palace. He further noted that Logan himself was forced to conceal his noble lineage just to facilitate this meeting. The prince then demanded to know how claiming the crown could possibly be feasible under such circumstances. With firm conviction, Logan declared that it was indeed possible. As the prince stammered in shock, Logan began to detail their initial advantage. He explained that the ongoing civil war had already significantly weakened the factions, supporting both the first and second princes. Logan, smiling confidently, asserted that he had the forces ready to finish off what remained of their power in one swift, decisive blow. That third prince gasped, demanding to know how Logan could possess such military strength. He noted that while he had heard of Logan's legendary feats on the battlefield, including the rumors of his duel with the Storm Sword, he was still skeptical. Logan praised the prince's insight for paying attention to the flow of the war, but revealed that twice the firepower they had seen was already waiting in his territory. Astonished, the prince questioned if this declaration was true. Logan, with a confident grin, concluded that if the neutral powers were to move now, they could easily sweep aside the depleted armies of the existing factions. Though overwhelmed and distressed by the implications, the prince asked if the neutral powers would truly lend their support. Logan smiled knowingly, asserting that he knew the nobles well. They would never refuse an opportunity to seize a new seat of power. Logan continued by stating that even without his master's aid, the Macleans already possessed more than enough power to act. He asserted that as time passed, the situation would only shift further in their favor. Looking deeply into Logan's eyes, the third prince finally conceded, stating he would place his trust in Sir Logan. As they clasped hands to seal the agreement, Logan thought to himself that convincing the prince had been the easy part. As the boy realized the only other choice was death, Logan's mind then turned to his next task, finding more passengers to board his ship. At the Floyd estate, Logan's father-in-law, Count Floyd, was seen hunched over his opulent desk, reading a letter with a look of visible distress as he wondered aloud what the document truly contained. Staring at the pages, he realized that the moment he had anticipated had finally arrived. Grasping the papers tightly, he exclaimed that these were the official proposals from the warring factions. He'd observed that the conditions being offered were absurdly favorable, so much so that he questioned whether there was any genuine intent to keep such extravagant promises. With a worried expression, Count Floyd turned to Logan and asked for his perspective on the offers. Logan met his father-in-law's concerned gaze with a knowing smile, replying simply that words alone could promise anything. The Count questioned if Logan was implying the proposals were merely a bluff. Logan affirmed this, explaining that the factions were simply desperate to drag even one more noble house into their respective causes. Count Floyd sighed, conceding that the factions must indeed be in a state of panic. Logan confirmed this observation, pointing out that, after the recent clash at Harun Castle, both sides had suffered devastating losses. Placing a hand on the stack of letters, Count Floyd surmised that Logan had come seeking his opinion on the political climate. He stood up, looking intently at Logan, and correctly concluded that Logan's plan was to exploit the faction's current weakness by rallying the neutral powers to resist them. Pressing a hand to his forehead, "Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Pi grow naturally. To stress, the Count further questioned if Logan intended for the Floyd family to serve as the rallying point for this resistance. He stressed that such a move involved the very fate of his house and was not a decision to be made lightly. He then guessed that if the Floyds were being asked to lead, it must mean Duke Felix had already refused the role. Logan, looking troubled, yet leaning toward his father-in-law, stated there was one critical fact the older man did not yet know. With a confident smile, Logan revealed that the Count did not truly grasp the massive strength their allied houses had recently achieved. As the older man stood stunned, Logan elaborated, explaining that they had recently engaged and defeated as many as 2 or 3 border lords simultaneously. As his father-in-law stared in intense disbelief, Logan added that final blow, they had even managed to repel the Stormsword army. The shocked Count shouted the name of Wiccan Kalia in response. Logan suggested that the Count could verify the claim by consulting Lady Eileen. At the mention of his daughter's involvement in such high-level fighting, Count Floyd erupted in a burst of rage. He threw the papers into Logan's face, shouting an expletive and interrupting Logan's attempts to confirm that Eileen had indeed been present on the battlefield. Reeling from the sudden outburst, Logan urged the man to settle down, eventually managing to complete his thought by mentioning that Lady Eileen was actually very proud of her father. Finally, Logan collected the scattered letters, sighed, and moved to conclude the business at hand. Count Floyd began to seriously weigh the options. Considering the combined influence of the Macleans and the Sword Duke, he concluded that if the remaining neutral nobles could be successfully gathered, they truly did stand a chance. After a moment of intense contemplation, Count Floyd declared his firm decision: he would gladly join Logan's side. As Logan and Count Floyd shook hands to cement the agreement, the era of passive observation ended. 8 months after the Civil War had first broken out, the neutral forces finally began to stir. A few days later, the scene shifted to the interior hall of Maclean Castle, where a fully armored Ronin suddenly rushed forward, urgently, shouting for his brother. He reached Logan's side and expressed his immense relief at seeing him return safely. Ronan explained that since the rest of the group had arrived days prior, he had grown increasingly anxious when Logan failed to appear. Logan offered a broad smile and inquired whether anything significant had occurred at the castle during his absence. Ronan quickly reported that, acting on Logan's orders following their withdrawal from the factions, they had immediately maximized the production of both Liberatio and repeating crossbows. Logan nodded, acknowledging Ronan's efficient management, and pressed for intelligence regarding the Central Front. Ronan looked away thoughtfully, directing Logan's attention toward reports that indicated the region had been uncharacteristically quiet since the clash a week ago. Logan voiced his surprise, wondering how the enemy forces could maintain such a long resistance, despite their heavy losses. After Logan expressed his bewilderment at the silence on the front, Ronan interrupted to politely inquire if there was some underlying problem. Logan dismissed the concern with a faint smile, stating that he had brought an object as a reward. Ronan looked down, surprised, and questioned what the item could be. He was then left stunned as Logan presented him with free gas, the sword that had belonged to the Moonlight Knight, Sir France. Logan stood confidently, with his arms crossed, explaining that the artifact Ronan held was estimated to be a Class 4 weapon. Utterly stunned, Ronan stammered in disbelief, questioning how he could possibly be the one to use such a masterpiece. He quickly stepped back, asserting that he simply could not accept the artifact. Logan, confused by the rejection, questioned why he would refuse such a gift. Ronan insisted that the sword he already possessed was more than sufficient. Logan teased him, suggesting his current blade might one day awaken natural magic as well. Ignoring this possibility, Ronan firmly presented the artifact back to Logan, suggesting it be given to his sister-in-law. Instead, he argued that as the future mistress of the Maclean family, Eileen's safety was naturally of greater importance. Logan chuckled faintly, acknowledging Ronan's perspective as the likely future head of the house. Before calmly considering the status of Sir Eileen, Ronan provided a cheerful update on Eileen's new role, mentioning she had recently commissioned a new set of armor. He noted that since Master Hammer had crafted it, its defensive capabilities were guaranteed, adding that she hadn't possessed proper armor until now. Logan mused that she must have used her previous reward money to purchase the expensive mithril alloy suit. He He reflected that while her initiative was admirable, the cost of true mithril would have left her without enough funds for a proper sword. With a sudden burst of resolve, Logan declared they should give the artifact to Eileen immediately. When Logan met Eileen and offered the blade, she countered instantly, stating the gift was far too great to accept. Logan, looking surprised and stuttering slightly, questioned her refusal. She asked what merit she had earned in the recent battle to deserve such a treasure, expressing concern that accepting it would damage the morale of the other knights. As she voiced these worries, 3 armored knights nearby noticed Logan and exclaimed in surprise at the young lord's presence. Realizing she was sensitive to the opinions of others, Logan reassured her that it was fine, but Eileen quickly asserted that he misunderstood her meaning. Logan smiled broadly and clarified that the gift was not intended for Sir Eileen the Knight, but was instead a wedding gift for his fiancée, Lady Eileen. He explained that due to the state of affairs, they had never held a formal engagement ceremony or exchanged gifts. Logan smiled genuinely and extended the sword, asking her to accept it as proof of his vow. He asked if that wasn't the true meaning of a gift, concluding with a confident smile and the wish that the sword would help her achieve even greater martial strength. Eileen blushed intensely, softly questioning if he was making a formal proposal. She met his gaze, pointing out that they were destined to marry anyway, yet asked the question as if the answer were obvious. Logan smirked and conceded that it was indeed a proposal, one delivered with a sword. Eileen's face flushed as she offered a simple thank you. The two then gently touched hands over the blade, finalizing their engagement. Eileen smiled radiantly, holding the sword close and stating that no proposal could be more perfect for her. Logan was momentarily stunned by her passionate response. She enthusiastically promised to work hard, prompting Logan to question what exactly she planned to focus on. She then pulled on his hand, suggesting a sparring match. Since it had been a while, Logan realized she meant improving her swordsmanship and immediately agreed to the match elsewhere. An unknown figure puffed on a cigar, reflecting that a full month had already passed since the massacre at Harun Castle. He noted that the world had been uncharacteristically quiet ever since. Continuing to speak, he acknowledged that while the damage to the factions was undeniably heavy, he questioned why the recovery was taking so long. He'd observed that, at one point, it seemed the Second Prince's faction was on the verge of victory. However, everything became uncertain the moment McLean forces withdrew, just as he was observing the opposition's heavy losses. A messenger suddenly burst into the room, screaming the Baron's name and announcing an urgent message from Duke Voltermain. Another figure, seated and startled, anxiously demanded to know the contents. The frightened messenger stammered that the message felt a little strange. Duke Voltermain had declared that all nobles loyal to Prince Romain must hear his words. Speaking with intense seriousness, he announced that from this moment, they would temporarily halt the war against the First Prince's faction to form an alliance with them instead. He then screamed that this alliance was formed specifically to root out the vile McLeans. Logan's father-in-law, Count Floyd, speaking through a communication orb, surmised that it appeared information had leaked from within the neutral faction, acknowledging the severity of the situation. Logan stated that the two factions had indeed formed an alliance and were now coming for their territory. The Count reported that while the enemy forces hadn't departed yet, they were definitely assembling their troops. Logan mused that an invasion could occur as early as next week, as he weighed the imminent threat. Logan's face tightened as he chastised himself for being careless. He reflected that since the neutral factions had held their ground until the very end in his past life, he had overestimated their resolve this time. He concluded that this overestimation was the reason the civil war had been able to pause for a month after Harun Castle. Reflecting on the motivations of the hostile factions, Logan realized they were using the pretext of treason to remove the threat from their side. He understood that if the neutral factions were defeated, they would simply be absorbed into the winning side, a deal that wasn't bad for the victors. Contemplating these dangerous political. Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps Amazing Abhi grow naturally. Maneuvers. Logan crossed his arms and inhaled sharply in thought, seeing the revelation of their backfired maneuvering. The pale and worried Count Floyd interrupted Logan's thoughts to ask if he was all right. Logan quickly assured his father-in-law he was fine, but asked for forgiveness as he needed to end the call immediately. Count Floyd questioned if Logan actually had a plan, to which Logan calmly replied that he did. Despite the suddenness of the enemy alliance, Logan offered a grim smile, stating that this turn of events wasn't entirely unexpected. A sudden gust of wind swept across the verdant green cliffs, sending leaves spiraling into the clear blue sky. Suddenly, the air was pierced by a desperate shout from Victoria, who screamed for everyone to clear the way. Responding to her cry, a massive golem surged forward over the grass, startled by the sight of the construct. One of the men exclaimed his surprise, staring in astonishment at Victoria and wondering if that kid was truly controlling these golems. He noted that the girl looked about the same age as his own daughter. A man holding a farming tool frantically gestured toward the golem, shouting for it to come over. The immense golem smashed its colossal fist into the ground, shattering the earth and sending massive chunks of rock flying. Once the dust subsided, a long, deep trench was left carved into the field. A nearby figure shouted for the exercise to continue and demanded that Lord Clayton perform his magic. Hammer stated he guessed they would only need to repeat the effort a dozen or so times more, while Clayton, chuckling, reflected that it felt like he had heard those exact words many dozen times already. Hammer insisted that if Clayton gave up now, his excellent staff would cry, and told him to look at how hard his youngest disciple was working. After Clayton complained about the constant need for the time staff, Patrick and Logan stood together over a map as Logan explained their objective. Logan stated they were scraping golems from the soil of the northern mountains and using them as materials to build a rampart. After discussing the plan with his father, Logan thought the initial plan was simply a brute force method, but he noted that the earthworks were truly impressive. Observing the magicians at work, Logan decided they were experts in grunt work, concluding that it was the Earth Magic Tower. After all, Logan reminded himself to make sure they received proper pay and vacation for their labor. Continuing his survey of the tactical blueprints, Logan noted that the new rampart would be anchored on the eastern stretch of the McLean Plains. He recognized the strategic reality that McLean town served as their heart should the Allied enemies unite. They would bypass the smaller fortifications on the Beffrose Plains to strike directly at the town. Logan explained that this probable path was the exact reason they had to establish such a formidable defensive line there. As Logan confirmed these defensive measures, Patrick addressed his son, questioning if the Sword Duke had offered any insight into the shifting political landscape. Logan paused, offering a faint smile as he assured his father that his master had remained silent thus far. Privately, Logan mused that since the entire kingdom knew the McLeans were being targeted, the Sword Duke was undoubtedly aware. He resolved that his master's lifelong dedication to honor was a boundary he could not cross. He could not force the Duke to sacrifice that reputation for his own safety. This hardship, Logan decided, was a burden he had to overcome through his own strength. A week later, the fortifications stood complete. Observing the finished structure, Logan remarked that while the design was simple due to the rushed half-month construction window, they had succeeded in making it both massive and incredibly sturdy. He noted with satisfaction that the addition of a moat was a splendid touch. Clayton, feeling a sense of parental pride over the construction, requested to name the wall Aegis. Logan smiled at the choice, hoping that a wall bearing the name of a divine shield would indeed signify that God stood by them. The peace was short-lived as Eileen urgently commanded the knights to track the enemy advancing from the east, while simultaneously preparing for those approaching from the north. Nearby, Victor issued a stern warning to his sister, Ree, telling her not to stray from the protection of her brothers. Ree glanced back, telling him not to worry about her and to focus on his own safety instead. A horn blared a deafening alarm across the battlements. Standing ready in his armor, Logan looked on as a scout announced the arrival of the vanguard. From the east, banners bearing the golden lion of the Volterman army flashed into view. Simultaneously from the south, the cavalry of the Douglas army rushed forward, their banners marked with crossed swords fluttering as the engagement commenced. Wiccan Kalia, visibly aggravated, questioned if the enemy truly believed they could avoid an attack. After deceiving the factions while building these enormous ramparts in secret, he wondered aloud if such a lack of honor was fitting for a disciple of the Sword Duke. he remarked to Juan Douglas that had they not assigned an observer to the Duke's residence, they might never have uncovered the truth. Juan Douglas agreed. Admitting he never expected the Macleans to resort to such mischievous tricks, he resolved that this turn of events was for the better. The Macleans were already marked for elimination after the war, so this was the perfect moment to turn the plains into their grave. Valtramain, gritting his teeth, branded the Macleans as wicked traitors who dared to look down on him. Lucien reminded him to stay focused on their true objective, seizing the production secrets for the Macleans' new weapon formula. Valtramain acknowledged this, determined to claim the prize before Douglas could. Observing the massive scale of the approaching forces, Patrick began to harbor doubts about their strategy. However, Logan remained radiating confidence. He reminded his father that their enemies were merely a temporary fragile alliance. Furthermore, Logan secretly contemplated a new method he had developed to restrain an opponent's aura. Raising his sword high, Logan shouted that victory was guaranteed and ordered all soldiers to prepare for the collision. Eileen, Ronan, Victor, Ree, Clayton, Kaisalin, Patrick, and Captain Hinckley all stood at the ready, awaiting his signal with grim determination. With a fierce roar, Logan declared that any who dared to invade Maclean territory would find their necks met by the edge of a blade. The scene shifts back several days to a conversation held through a communication aura between Juan and Jordan. Juan asserts that despite their ongoing civil war over the throne, they must unite their efforts to punish the treacherous Macleans. He suggests they freely share intelligence, though Jordan remains largely unimpressed by the overture. Jordan privately concludes that Juan is merely fishing for information because he is operating in the dark, yet still has the audacity to act superior. Jordan tells Juan that he hasn't noted any massive shifts in the Maclean military strength, though he notes it might be a similar situation to when the Wolves were defeated. Juan smirks at this, remarking that since only a few months have passed, the most the Macleans could have done is conscript a handful of extra soldiers. He suggests that the only real concerns are the red-headed brat and their troublesome weaponry. Jordan disagrees, pushing Juan to reveal more. When Juan plays dumb, Jordan smiles and points out that the last person to engage them was Juan's own subordinate, Wiccan Kalia. Changing his tone, Jordan asks how Logan and the others managed to repel a superhuman and emerge unscathed. Juan himself wonders about the failure, privately theorizing that Wiccan simply has a habit of letting his guard down. On a strategic map, it appears the plan involves pinning Logan, Clayton, and Ronan inside the castle walls, while Jordan and Juan launch a coordinated pincer attack from two different sides. In the present moment, the assault has begun. One force strikes the front gates while the other moves against the flank. Luther Kale utilizes his aura to boost his speed, preparing to leap headfirst into the fray with the boast that he will shatter their defenses. On the opposite side, Wiccan Kalea does the same, urging his comrades to trust in his wind as they advance, morbidly noting that death is a constant companion, like the wind at his side. From atop the eastern ramparts, Kaisalin observes the approaching vanguard. Seeing the two commanders, he realizes the enemy has deployed superhumans to neutralize their arrows and bombs. He calmly gives the order to open fire. As Luther nears the wall, he expects an easy climb, but he is suddenly startled. He finds it impossible to believe the sheer number of crossbowmen the Macleans have suddenly amassed. It seems the sheer volume of arrows is more than he anticipated, and he grins. Riling up his mana, he swings a massive hammer, shattering the incoming bolts. However, his efforts aren't quite enough. A glance behind him shows that many of his soldiers and knights have been struck and taken down regardless. Above the northern ramparts, Ronan takes command, directing the Vigilante Corps to prepare for their volley. Looking at the approaching army, Ronan reflects that the enemy must have completely underestimated their strength. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Apai grow naturally. After all, the Macleans have armed and trained over 10,000 civilians with crossbows. He smiles, internally noting that his brother is truly amazing. Back on Luther's side, the arrows finally annoy him enough that he crushes one under his mana-infused foot. He screams, declaring that no heady precautions will be able to stop him. He leaps through the air using his mana, intent on reaching the wall. Seeing a superhuman approaching, one of the mages prepares his staff, determined to keep him at bay. As Luther closes in on the rampart, a massive golem suddenly appears, rising to meet him. The golem delivers a slap so powerful that it sends Luther plummeting back to the ground. Like a comet, fortunately for Luther, he lands in the moat near the walls. He surfaces, reeling at the realization that the McLeans have actually used the materials of the ramparts themselves to create a golem. Clayton appears, declaring that he isn't finished yet. Luther is hit again by what he assesses to be intermediate magic, which increases the pressure on him and prevents him from surfacing while forcing the air from his lungs. Clayton gives the order for his soldiers to strike the half-giant while he is trapped in the water. From a distance, Wiccan Kalia watches the scene unfold, realizing that Luther has been taken down. He remains remarkably calm, preparing to launch his own attack while analyzing the failure. He muses that Luther's massive size actually makes him a more vulnerable target for intermediate magic, making this a particularly bad matchup. He concludes that since their second-in-command has been overwhelmed by the defense, Duke Valtramine will have no choice but to step in directly to save him. As the golems continue to rise from the earth, Kalia calculated that Logan should only have 2 Sixth Circle mages at his disposal. By the time the third golem manifested, Kalia dismissed the threat, thinking to himself that this would be a piece of cake. However, one of the constructs raised its massive hand, and from within its stone grip, 10 charges of Liberatio emerged. The golem hurled the explosives directly at Kalia, watching the projectiles arch through the air. Kalia wondered if these were the same bombs he had heard Logan was utilizing. He readied his blade, declaring that such a trick would not work on him a second time. With a precise motion, he conjured a localized swirl of wind with his sword, trapping all the bombs safely within the vortex. Smirking, he called out for Logan to show himself. Just as he had anticipated, Logan lunged from the chaos, attacking Kalia head-on. Kalia managed to parry the strike, his counter swing driving Logan back several meters. Despite the distance created, Kalia sensed he might be at a slight disadvantage based on his current stance. He glared at Logan, remarking on how thoroughly the young man had managed to deceive him during their previous encounter. Logan countered by stating that if Kalia hadn't picked a fight with them, he would have kept his word. Kalia branded him a liar, but quickly noticed something unsettling. Having just clashed auras with Logan, Kalia couldn't fathom how the boy remained completely unscathed. Aura is the authoritative destruction. It is only natural for a weaker power to collapse in the face of such a superior force. The balance between their powers didn't make sense to Kalia. He stared at Logan's hands, wondering if he was secretly relying on a defensive artifact. Yet even then, he shouldn't be able to block his aura repeatedly with such ease. As their blade clashed once more, Kalia resolved to end the struggle with his very next blow. Unfortunately, it appeared Logan had successfully blocked that attack as well. At that moment, Kalia finally realized the truth. Logan was facing his aura head-on with nothing but sheer raw force. The clash between them took on the appearance of 2 collapsing black holes. Even so, the toll was evident on Logan's body. During their last duel, Logan had deciphered the process through which Kalia's aura was released, allowing him to avoid a direct, devastating hit. However, avoiding the strikes wasn't enough. As his own attacks seemed to have no effect, Logan knew he had no choice but to push his plan into its next phase. Elsewhere on the battlefield, someone remarked that he had never expected to witness such a sight in their lifetime. A countryside baron whose name was entirely unknown until recently was now making a mockery of the nation's giants. Jordan Valterman, his eyes filled with the killer's focus, finally drew his blade. He approached the ramparts with cold certainty, declaring that playtime was officially over. On another front, golems continued to rain bombs down upon the soldiers, while crossbowmen maintained a relentless volley from the walls. Amidst the carnage, Juan Douglas stood unflinched, his gaze steady as he surveyed the chaos. He declared that such representations of weak power could not intimidate him. To Juan, the fight felt fundamentally strange. Although it appeared that the second prince's forces had suffered more visible losses, it was actually the first prince's army that was sustaining significantly more casualties. Juan mused that their condition shouldn't be much different from the McLeans, and he began to wonder what the hell Logan was truly thinking. When the 2 factions first declared war, chaos naturally descended upon all the vassals. However, with time running out, Logan and his advisors had to quickly regain their composure and seek a solution. Among their primary defenses was the construction of the great ramparts on the new McLean lands. During these preparations, Philip proposed a psychological tactic. They should strategically alienate the two enemy factions from one another. Patrick, Logan, and Hinckley were initially puzzled by Philip's phrasing. Philip admitted it was an odd choice of words but asked them to hear him out. He explained that while the two factions appeared united for now, there could ultimately be only one king. However, outraged they might be at the McLeans, Philip argued that the traitor would always be secondary to their desire for the throne. Both Patrick and Logan agreed with this logic. Philip continued, noting that while the enemies wanted to eliminate an Iser and acquire the production methods for bombs and crossbows, each faction would also secretly love to see the others suffer heavy casualties. The plan was to exploit these hidden agendas and embolden their mutual distrust. Logan asked if Philip meant exactly what he suspected, and Philip confirmed he did. In the present, the duel between Logan and Kelia continues. Kelia remains fixated on how Logan is resisting him. Despite his analysis, he can find no trace of an artifact. He finds it impossible to believe that Logan is facing a superhuman with raw force alone. Normally, Kelia mused, both Logan's physical strength and his internal organs should have been pulverized into mush by now. Logan taunted Kelia, noting that the knight was clearly getting nervous because the battle wasn't unfolding as he had envisioned. Logan then enhanced his strike with a blend of aura and fire, aiming directly for Kelia's neck. Kelia laughed, thinking a large-scale attack would never leave a scratch on him, but he didn't get to finish the thought as Logan's blade closed in. Kelia realized too late that his aura was unable to stop the impact. With the blade an inch from his head, Kelia had no way to escape. The force was so immense that Kelia plummeted from the sky like a rock tied to a heavy truck. The sheer power of the blow was astounding. Kelia's soldiers rushed toward their fallen commander, one of them screaming that if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Apai. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.